It's Christmas. Hurry, let's go down and get to the presents. Now, you may have a childhood memory that captures that kind of thought and that phrase, that you were in the bed with your family or maybe sisters and brothers all waking you up and saying, come on, hurry, let's get down and find the presents. And oddly enough, you know where to find the presents, don't you? You know exactly where they are. Isn't that funny in life that we know that there are great gifts at Christmas time and we know they're hidden under the tree with all those lights. We know exactly where to rush to. Yet somehow in the journey of our spiritual lives, we don't always know where to find the greatest gift of all. We don't understand and how to find wonderful truth and the unfolding that's there for us. We don't often know where to go and where it is to be found that the greatest things and greatest gifts of all are there for us. And so we find that this story of Christmas is helping us along that line. The story of Christmas. You're all familiar with it. But quite often we're not really familiar with the message it brings to our lives. We're not really familiar with the powerful guidance and instruction it's offering for us on this wonderful journey. And you may look at this story and say, it's great to read it Christmas time and season after season. And how do I make it applicable to my life? And what does it mean for me? Today, you read the text of the shepherds. And you may say, well, I'm not a shepherd. Am I? And you may say, I'm not tending sheep. Are you? I've never received a message from God and angels never appeared. Or have you? I've never been to a manger. Or really, maybe you have. Because today's text is helping us to understand that this story is all about finding ourselves in the text. For the scripture is meant for us and it's timeless all through the ages. And so it's about us finding ourselves. Where are we in this story? And it's about, in that process, finding the truth that applies to us. For all of this is summed up in that thought. Scripture was meant to be interpreted. Quite often we read stories and we take them face value in black and white, and we don't engage the spiritual work of interpretation to say, what does this mean? And how do I apply it? And where do I engage it in my life? Because it just seems like a story. Or I don't understand the true meaning of it. Proverbs 28 verse 1 is one that you might use when you think about going out jogging. Because if you take it literally, it says, only the wicked run when they are chased. Maybe you want to rethink jogging then. You see, we're meant to look at Scripture and interpret it clearly and see what it means for us, apply it to our lives. We often wonder, why doesn't the Bible just come out and say it? Wouldn't it be great if it was just so cut and dried and cleared? It says, here are things you just need to know, and wrap it up in a simple phrase. Yet the beauty of Scripture is that it is filled with nuances of symbolism and metaphor, because that's what captures your attention. Now, if I just told you clear-cut facts and no great stories, sometimes you'd look and say, well, that's kind of boring and I've lost interest. And it's too simple and too easy. But when we tell the story, you're engaged and captured in the story. Oh, you may have heard the story of Cinderella. You're captured in all the nuances. You're captured in all the wonderful things about maybe you're feeling that you were left behind as the stepsisters went off to the ball. Maybe you're left out and not included in some way. And the story begins to unfold all kinds of feelings, emotions for you. And suddenly you begin to see yourself that maybe your fairy godmother has come. Maybe there's a hope and a promise for you to live out. And suddenly in the story you see all the wonderful magic unfolding that makes things possible in your life. And you end up at the ball discovering the prince, only to think that that's been taken away from you. But one day your prince does come. You tell that beautiful story over and over again to convey wonderful feelings, emotions, and morals and truths. So it is that Jesus began to teach, and the writers of the Gospels began to write in beautiful stories to help convey a deeper message that you might understand something, but told in story form to keep your interest. And so it is Jesus so many parables. He began to preach and teach in that manner, in that way, to engage people, to draw them in, that they might receive this insight and wisdom. Sometimes if it's just laid out before you, you don't appreciate it. But going on the journey of traveling through the storytelling, it unfolds something beautiful and makes it applicable for our lives. This is our very work when we look at Scripture. It's to awaken us to something meaningful and deeper for our lives. For our whole spiritual life is awakening to what is this truth that is so rich and deep for our lives. For life is full of all kinds of questions, and we're seeking those answers. Why am I here? Why do I even live this life? How do I succeed in this world of limitation? Well, the Gospel of Luke starts out at square one with these beautiful answers for us that we find in the story of Christmas. It begins with shepherds. Wait a minute, shepherds, that's right. So let's put ourselves in the story that you too are shepherds. Shepherds of what? Anyone here own some sheep? You've got some dogs and some cats. You got some other things, but anyone own some sheep? Oh, we do have sheep. What are our sheep? For metaphorically and symbolically, all through Scripture, the sheep has been a wonderful symbol of our thoughts. And you're the shepherd of your own thoughts. How many times have we found in our own experiences, all we like sheep have gone astray, that passage of Scripture, all of our thoughts have gone astray, and you've gone to the grocery store, you don't even know why you're there, you're wondering why you're here, and you've got to shepherd those thoughts. Call those back in and say, wait a minute, why am I here? What am I doing? Where am I going? You see, as we put ourselves in the story, we find these beautiful shepherds out on the field at night in the darkness. And so often we find ourselves with thoughts that we're trying to guard in a world that's completely dark. Dark in ignorance, blind to truth, unable to really see and understand all the light and love that's there for us. And in the darkness, we have questions. We wonder. We just don't know the answers. And we're seeking and we're searching. And those shepherds out on the field were there at night, and suddenly there's this wonderful revelation. And let me tell you this, that as you're shepherding thoughts, as you're in contemplation, as you begin to think, as you begin to meditate, it's amazing what is revealed to you. And these beautiful aha moments that we have in our life, where the Spirit is speaking to us in angelic terms, that there are revelations for us, that we go, wow, you know what? I never really thought of it that way. It's amazing as I visit with those people who are really engaging in the spiritual practices of meditation and saying, you know what, my mind has been so clear that in those moments I really felt that it was God speaking to me, showing me, giving me direction. I really felt the unfolding of insight and wisdom. I felt it was so amazing that it almost scared me. And just like the shepherds who heard this beautiful revelation, who hear the angelic news, they were afraid, frightened. Sometimes we get afraid because something's too good to be true. You know, like we're like, whoa, wait a minute. The goodness of God is there. Our blessings are mine. Our abundance is there for me. Whoa, that sounds a little bit too good to be true. And it kind of scares us. And we're even a little bit afraid of our own spiritual success. Afraid of what's available out there sometimes in the journey of our lives. And so suddenly as this revelation takes place, as they're telling the shepherds this good news that there is a babe born, there is this wonderful promise unfolded, there is something wonderful birthing right now. Where? This revelation is, where is this? Found lying in a manger, wrapped in swaddling clothes. And what do? They say, let's get up and experience it. Let's get up and see it. I want to invite you, the Christmas story is all about us waking up to this wonderful opportunity to rise up, go find and experience all the goodness that God has for us, awaiting for us to grasp and take hold of. It's there for us. So like shepherds, we're called to rise and go up and find this something wonderful that's born anew, to locate it and find it where? Well, let's step back, where the story also includes Mary and Joseph. Mary and Joseph traveling to Bethlehem to pay the taxes, going back to an ancestral home. You know, when you go back to your ancestral home, that means your ancestors there, you got relatives there. It's most likely they went back to stay with relatives in Bethlehem. And in the hospitality of Eastern culture, it was so true as we study the history of Eastern culture in that Palestinian land of that day. It would be that people would go, and there wasn't always a Motel 6, a Super 8, a Marriott. There wasn't a Ritz-Carlton, and you need not make reservations. You simply show up at the door. Now, I always wondered why Mary hadn't made reservations. If she was going to the inn, wouldn't she call, wouldn't she call Orbitz or one of these wonderful reservation lines and one of these wonderful places and make that reservation ahead of time because she was coming? But she was going, and she and Joseph arriving at homes of relatives to stay. And there she finds that there's no room in the inn. We wonder about that. Inn we think of as motel or hotel. I had the opportunity to go to Israel several years ago. And I got to go and see where they are proclaiming the birth of Jesus in Bethlehem. Got to stand in the places where they believed that this possibly was the location. And our wonderful Jewish guide who studied antiquities and history began to unfold some things that many times are kind of strange to us as Westerners because, well, we haven't been celebrating it that way. We've kind of been removed from Israel itself and gone off in our own tangents of how we think and our ideas because we haven't gone back to the actual experience, only to find that that home or that house was really a dwelling where there would be 3 rooms. There would be the sleeping room, which might have been referred to as the inn or the place where people slept, the common space, and then the space where they kept the animals. It was like a 3-bedroom kind of place or 3-room dwelling. And so when guests arrived and the sleeping quarters were full, well, there's the only available spot would be in the common area. And in that common area, that sort of common space, adjacent to it was called the place where the garage, where you might park your donkey, where you might keep those animals. It was there that there was a manger, a feeding trough. So between the common space, you would find that there was a space opening where they could throw food and take care of the animals without having to walk into the barn and get their feet all in that manure and that mess and get all stinky, So it was this wonderful experience. Now, years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Holland, where my mother was born, in Newdorp. My parents became Americans in the 80s, and to go back to their ancestral home and to visit my relatives there took me, well, this is where your mother was born, in this house. And when I got there, wow, she was quite in vogue because she lived in a tiny house. And you know how they're so hip and trendy right now? Everybody's living in these tiny, tiny, tiny houses. Well, literally, she was in vogue years ago because they were living in a tiny house, which was 3 rooms, a sleeping room, a common room, and the place where they kept the cow. And when I walked into the house and got to see the house itself and got to experience the people who were living there were very apologetic for their humble little abode. And I said, oh, this is so wonderful for me to experience this house where my mother was born. And where would she be born? Well, it was a busy time. There were 4 other kids. There were all the relatives there. Everybody had come for the birthing. Most likely, your mother was born in the common room. Yes. Now, she wasn't laid in a manger because they were fortunate at least to have a crib. But it was that very same concept of those Eastern homes, that very simple lifestyle where people would find that this is where you would birth and how you would live and how you would exist. So as we look into the simplicity of the story, we find no room in the inn, and that inn really is our consciousness. When we look in the physical realm and in the literal realm, there is no room, is there, for the spiritual. When we're constantly seeing things, everything in a literal context, we're wondering because there's no room in the inn, the dwelling place, the place where things might come to our hearts and our lives, where they might find abode, where they might rest, because we've crowded everything out, filled it with all kinds of things. And quite often in our literal interpretation of Scripture, we have created a space where there's no room for the spiritual because we're constantly looking for the literal. We're constantly looking for that which we can't find. It's never meant to be present because it was spiritual to begin with. And the story there that where there's never room for faith because we dwell in a space full of limitation. And we're always saying, there's nothing there for me. So even there we find that in this wonderful place, there is this manger. Mary there giving birth in this common space lays the baby in this manger place. What would the manger mean for us in our individual lives? For what we lay is that which is birthed. And where do we lay that which is birthed in our lives? Shall we say in the spiritual realm? It's in mind. So the simplicity of, we might think of a manger place, a place where feeding, is that place that was a place where nutrition for that is offered, food is offered. And so we might think of, where is all that food for the soul offered? The manger of the mind. This is where it rests. This is where we discover it. This is where we understand it. So lying in the manger, lying in this wonderful place, is the unfolding of consciousness of Christ. This wonderful awareness for us. It rests in mind, our intellect, our knowing. It's the center of the consciousness. Now, let's go back and say, what is Christ? Because quite often we've lost the concept. We think of Jesus and his last name is Christ, born to Mr. and Mrs. Christ, right? That's Mary and Joseph's last name. No, that is not true. Let's make a little correction there. What is the Christ? The Christ is this enlightening, this awakening in our hearts and our lives, awakening to this divinity within us. And so it is that we're invited in this manger of mind to awaken to a divinity, a Christ, an enlightenment within us. This is what we're seeking. We're seeking and searching this understanding for our lives that we are joint heirs with Jesus, that we are children of God, that we are there in this wonderful presence to be found in the sonship, just the same, in that some wonderful way. For John, the first chapter of John 3, chapter 3, verse 1 says, how great is the love of the Father lavished on us that we should be called children of God. That's right, children of God. All of us called children of God. All of us then, understanding this. And now if we're heirs or children of God, it says we are heirs in Romans chapter 8. So we understand this divine sonship. Does that make sense to you? It's awakening within your life that we've come to the manger to discover that we are children of God and all that it unfolds for us. That we too have a divinity within us. That we too have something to awaken to, a power, a presence, a wonderful love, a light, all that is there for us. For the story of Christmas is all about guiding us through this journey of discovery, to discover your highest and your best. For we're searching and we're looking and we're trying to find. For as we find then, as we move to the book of Matthew in the Christmas story, by the way, Matthew doesn't say anything about the shepherds. It tells a totally different story. Interesting. If you didn't have the book of Luke and you only had the book of Matthew, you'd never known about the shepherds. And if you only had the book of Matthew, you'd only know about the wise men and never know about the shepherds. Each one's trying to tell a little different nuance to the story, but echoing this wonderful truth. Wise men were looking, searching, trying to find. And there were beautiful signs that are there for them, revelations, and they began to follow the sign. The light from on high above was leading them to a place of discovery in their own lives, a place of higher understanding. And they too arrived to find the child in the house. Unfortunately, not at the manger. Not like we may think, not as we have told the stories over and over again, or lived out in pageantry, or set up in our nativity scene. That story unfolds in a little different context, but finding that in the home is where you find the Christ. In the temple, in the house, in the dwelling, that's where you will find. That's where you're going to find it. And we're looking for all kinds of things. We're looking on the outside. We're looking for the physical. We're looking for it to happen everywhere else. And we're wondering why we can't find it, because the scripture is leading us to this wonderful step one of your spiritual life. Discover. This is all about finding. Discover. Your journey begins with finding this beautiful truth that you are spiritual in a physical world. It echoes it over and over again. Yet we so often want to just consciously believe we are just physical. We're just physical beings. There's nothing spiritual around us. Spirituality is mystical and confusing to all of us, yet it is our norm. It is how we're called to live each and every day from the spiritual realm. And knowing that when we do, we see amazing things unfold for our lives. So we sing these Christmas carols, oh, come, let us adore him. Come and adore that wonderful Christ awareness within us. Come and adore the divine presence that's within us. We have our silent night, and we sing of those wonderful carols, that quiet of mind that allows us, the Spirit, to bring the message of good news to us. We sing about the angels heralding the good news as we then welcome these wonderful insights that come to us as God reveals to you today these wonderful truths. You see, the story of Christmas happens over and over and over again. It's meant to happen today for you and for each and every one of us, for us to find that truth away in the manger, lying in the manger of our consciousness, our awakening. And when we awaken to this, wow, there's something born anew. And Christmas comes alive for us. It's not just a historical story. It's not just an ancient thing. It's a living thing that's alive for each and every day. For the divine is telling us to go within, to find this place of nurturing, to go within and find the greatest gift that's been waiting for you. It's been waiting all along. It's the gift of this wonderful awareness that you are the child of God. You, too, are this beautiful gift for this world. You have been the opportunity to find born within you all the love and all the light. For Jesus has shown us the way and has called for us each and every day to follow in that way, calling us to follow in the example that everything of the story of Jesus is ours to embrace. So this season, I invite you to come to this wonderful manger of the mind, shall we say, manger of the consciousness, and know that the Christ is lying there, born anew for you to experience today. Be like the shepherd who is guarding the sheep, and hearing the good news, you go and tell them that which you've discovered. Christmas is alive. Christmas is real. Christmas is happening here and now within me. Amen.